Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Three Principles Global Community webinar. The Three Principles Global Community, or 3PGC, is a nonprofit organization that's committed to bringing an understanding of the three principles to people throughout the world. Today, we have Christa Campsall with us. Christa, for many years, was a K through 12 classroom teacher, as well as a learning services teacher in special education. Throughout this varied experience, she benefited from an understanding she encountered in 1975 when she was a university student. At that time, Christa was introduced by Sydney Banks to what today is called the Three Principles. Even a first glimmer of this knowledge had the power to transform her life by impacting her teaching and learning, as well as deepening the level of happiness and peace of mind in her personal life. Currently, Christa has created a K through 12 curriculum, My Guide Inside, with a team of dedicated educators grounded in the three principles. Christa facilitates professional development for educators at home on Salt Spring Island, as well as in the global community. In this webinar, Christa will reflect on the extraordinary privilege of Sid Banks being a mentor to her. So Christa, I am so happy to meet you finally, and really excited to hear what you have to say. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. I've been looking forward to this, so thank you. First of all, I'd like to express my gratitude to 3PGC. Some years ago, a trusted friend recommended that I join to be supportive, and I did, and I find that the support has really gone both ways, and I'm grateful for that. And also for this opportunity for this webinar today. Thank you. So yes, Sydney Banks' discoveries and teachings impacted my entire teaching career. So I'll tell a little bit of my story. Back in the mid-70s, I was just heading back to university after a break. I took a break because I thought maybe teaching wasn't really for me. I found that my skill set and personality were just fine with kids who were open to learning, but I really struggled reaching those who were acting out or shut down. So I thought, maybe it's not for me. So I was giving this degree one last chance. In September of it was 1975, in the early fall, my then friend, now husband, Bob Campsall, came to visit me in the city, and he was just overflowing with this excitement of, he told me he'd found the secret to life. And I'm like, oh, really? Pretty skeptical about it. But what happened with Bob was he was living in the Gulf Islands. He had a little job there, adding an addition to the local school. And as luck would have it, I would say, Chip and Jan Chipman were his neighbors. And over the summer, Bob really noticed a change in Chip. They were both really interested in the secret to life and philosophy and so on. And Bob really was struck by the change he saw in his neighbor and friend. And Chip was, he explained that he'd met Sydney Banks and heard some truth as Sid was sharing. And that Sid was holding his first public talk on Salt Spring and, suggested Bob go to that. And he did. And Bob was really taken by Sid's talk. It was the feeling that the talk provided really, really got to him deeply. And he was deeply touched by that. And so, lucky for me, he decided that he should come and visit me in Vancouver, come and visit me in the city and tell me about this. And so he had a couple of things that he'd heard that he shared with me. I mean, that I remember. I mean, he talked a lot, but what I remember was that happiness is inside. And I'm like, Oh, yeah, that I really like the feeling around that. I've always, wanted to be optimistic and happy. And the other fact that he shared was that thought creates reality. And this one I struggled to understand and argued with. And the more we talked, the more kind of intellectual I got, and I kind of really struggled with thought creates reality. However, I was really taken by the feeling, and something linked. Bob left the city, he went on, and I stayed. Of course, I was enrolled and just about to start a long-term practicum. And there was something that kind of lingered with me about that feeling, and not even thought creates reality, but just thought. What? Thought has something to do with this secret. And it really, I was really taken by that. And shortly thereafter, I started my long-term practicum, and I was just delighted to find that my heart's desire of reaching these hard to reach kids, or kids that were shut down, it was happening. And it wasn't even through, intellectual analysis or preparation or anything like that, nothing to do with the intellect or skill set. But all of a sudden I was able to reach these kids, and that we were able to connect, and I was able to, one might say, my wisdom helped me to know what to do, what to say, how to be. And all of a sudden I was off to the races, and I was really very much enjoying my teaching experience, and carried on, obviously, to finish my degree. So that's in the fall. In the spring, and this was new knowledge in the world. Thought creates reality. It was quite, I have to tell you, quite exhilarating, as well as calming. It's kind of a contradiction, but that's how it felt. In the early spring of the next year, Sid was holding a public talk on one of the Gulf Islands, which were relatively nearby, and Bob invited me to go, and I did. And I'd never, had I even seen a picture of him? I'm not sure. I'd never heard him speak. There were no recordings at the time, but I was totally taken with Sid's talk. And the feeling was so deep. Oh my gosh. And what I really loved, there was a lot, this is in the 70s, and there was a lot of searching going on, and there was a lot of following this and that. And I'm like, that's just not me. I'm just not into that. So what really got me about Sid's talk was that he was saying, you have the answer. You are your best teacher. And I'm like, oh, I like the sound of that. That really, really felt good and rang true. The other thing about the first talk I went to was that I had this tremendous feeling all of a sudden for wisdom. And as a student, I know I was kind of chasing the intellect and trying to be all clever and so on. And then this was really new for me, is that, oh, wow, the wisdom has something to offer to improve my life and to help me with being just happy and content. So it all amounted to really dramatic shift in my life. Mind you, I'm 21 years old. There's a lot of changing and developing going on at that age. Young people are developing their philosophy and just gaining experience on how, what life's about and what's important and what isn't. But this feeling of wisdom being in a part of me, and that I could access it and I could use it to benefit my work and my personal life. And anyway, a lot of happiness, a lot of joy, just feeling that contentment from inside. So never looked back, really. Obviously life has its ups and downs, but it's been a learning journey for 44 years, just gaining a bit more knowledge as I can here and there, and being content with life and what I have and so on. But as luck would have it, in the early 90s, we moved back to Salt Spring Island, and Sid did as well, like within days of each other. We knew he was moving back, and he knew we were moving back, but it was really another phase of my learning, in that now we became very close to Sid in as a personal friend and family friend and so on. And obviously I was able to be mentored by him, as we'd have, special events and just ordinary occasions, going for walks, whatever. But we had numerous talks about education and working, what it is to work with kids. And so it was really beautiful the way he saw students who were struggling. And we would talk about it, and he was like, if you can see past the struggle, past the problem, to who they are, and when you do that with anyone, whether it be student or teacher, when you do that, when you see past the struggle, you feel an empathy and a compassion. And this actually translates to, one would call, love and understanding. And he would tell me very clearly, if you are open with and go to someone who's struggling with love and understanding, it will be returned. And so what a career to work with kids, especially the ones who struggle and you can see they're having a really rough go, to be able to connect with a child or youth and feel that compassion, and then experience well-being together, experience wisdom, or whatever you want to call it, experience the love and understanding together. That, from that moment on, that changes the trajectory for that child or youth. It opens the door of their potential, so they can be on their learning journey. And rather than, I'm a teacher, obviously the intellect is important, but rather than have the intellect not serving you, and it's actually creating problems, these kids would tap into their resilience, wisdom, whatever one chooses to call it, and start to see that, in fact, they were deserving of peace. They were deserving of happiness and success. And then from there on, you just kind of, whatever makes common sense, and in a practical way or whatever, you just start the journey together to help the child on their way to being healthy and successful. Very powerful. And the beauty of it classroom teachers, we all know, are super busy and time. But this is not about taking time. It doesn't take time. It kind of that a few seconds of feeling at peace and experiencing our well-being is a tremendous treasure, and it gets us on our journey to experiencing that well-being more of the time as our intellect settles. So what a gift to work with Sid in this, work with him, listen to him, have these discussions about what it is to be a teacher and what it is to be a student. And I think I'm really touched by how Sid would get to the heart of the matter. If he had, if there was some advice that, the teacher, that I should look to the child and see the innocence and see their struggle and see who and what they really are. If he was talking to a child, he would say the same thing, to look to the teacher or the parent and see their innocence and see, isn't that beautiful? It was like always, the answer was always the same, whether you're talking about a kid or a parent or a teacher. It's just seeing that innocence in someone, feeling that love and understanding, and it really opens the door to to their own potential. Um, I did many years of classroom teaching and absolutely loved it. Worked with some kids in Sid's family, so we had that in common, and it was really fabulous to build that community in a classroom, help kids get on their way, to success. And what we found was, some kids were acting out, were belligerent or frozen, and then others were quite healthy. And what we found is by sharing the principles in a classroom, whether directly or indirectly, because really it is about the deep feeling, that's number one. The kids that were reasonably healthy learned how to be with those who were struggling. Isn't that beautiful? They would see through the way I was, and I have little cards and letters that I've saved. They would see how to not make things worse for someone. They would see how to feel compassion for their peers and be a friend and be friendly and respect their dignity. Dignity was a big important word for Sid, and it is for me too, to really treat someone with human dignity and ensure that their human dignity is intact. Because if you've had experienced abuse or whatever in the past, you can feel less than. So for someone who you trust to see you with dignity, it really brings that forward. I read recently, I don't know who, can't remember who to quote, but health attracts health. So if a teacher is coming from a place of joy, well-being, compassion, it will attract that, which is obviously in the student. It will attract that. So we saw, when I started, there was no curriculum, there were no tapes, there was really very little language, but the feeling of understanding had profound effects. And we saw those who were belligerent settle down, those who were really shut down, head on the desk, could barely speak. We saw them blossom. And then we saw the ones who were reasonably healthy gain an understanding of how to work with others. So that was really, really beautiful for me to see. In order to keep a job on this little island, I did upgrade a couple of times. I did earn a diploma in special education because with that specialty, there was a little more job security. And it was tremendous to take this little bit of understanding I have into the world of special education. It was, that's how I ended my career, was in special education. And it was incredible to work with children and youth that have they would have to have a DSM-5 before they were on my caseload. And so to work with whatever the designation is, whether it be a developmental disability or it may be that their intellect is super high and it creates a writing disability, whatever the issue, didn't matter whether it was severe behavior or reading issues, whatever it was, to go with this understanding and to help these youth move forward with a little bit of understanding about thought and the wisdom within. Very powerful to see. And then also in special education, we're privileged to work with families a little bit more as well, to be able to work with the families and have the parents see the child or the youth in a new light and start building that positive life and happy life. So you can go either end of the spectrum. You have a teenager who's has a developmental disability and there's, the lower IQ, for that youth, you can teach about the feeling created from thought. You can teach that actually that aggression is not automatic. It actually stems from what the thought is. And to be able to help that child catch the thought and not, act out. Talk about powerful. And of course, why are they aggressive? Because they really want a friend. So they're kind of smashing people around and stuff like that. They're just so desperate for a friend, but don't understand how to make a friend. And then they start to see, oh, it's something about my thought. Or if I start to get this feeling and I know it's leading to aggression, I can switch. I don't have to go with that. And that is tremendously life-changing. Does the child or the teen still have a DSM designation? Yes. Will they have certain disability rights as an adult? Yes. But the difference is from going from very unhappy and aggressive and isolated to feeling content and happy and having some friends and doing the academics to the best of their ability. Incredible. And just imagine that somebody who's, pretty big, they're all pretty big in high school, to take the culture from, oh, there she is, and am I going to get smashed into the lockers, to there's someone who's kind and friendly. The ripple effect in a school is just incredible, what that does for the culture. Another example I think is people are always interested in is, what about those kids that have like the IQ way beyond average being 100? Yet, and that can create a writing learning disability. I won't get into the details, but there's statistically ways of that happens. So all of a sudden I've got a student who's extremely bright, intellectually capable. I'm the program manager, but what's going on? Unhappy, failing, crying, panics, all this stuff, because the intellect alone can't do it for you. So to work with these kids on that end of the spectrum of the intellectual IQ is incredible, for them to realize, oh, my intellect doesn't have to do absolutely everything for me. I can actually synchronize with the wisdom I have within and settle down. The intellect settles down and it does its job rather than trying to do everything. So to see those kids who are intellectually gifted and have high aspirations, in post-secondary to do serious careers, find their contentment and peace of mind to be able to do their best on their academic assessments, to be able to also have friends and have some peace of mind and some fun. It's quite remarkable. So, I've pretty much, I think I've worked with every DSM classification that appears in a school, but the answer is always the same, as Sid would say, that experience that well-being with someone, just being, seeing them as A-okay, and then starting on the journey of now what? Now that we are able to tap our potential and we're accessing our resilience and wisdom. It's really powerful. Sid would say, you can only build them up. And that's kind of my mantra. I love how you would say that. And I think that's, I'm a teacher and I work with children and youth, but I'm pretty darn sure that works with any relationship, that you can really, if you really, really want to help, you can actually only build people up. Obviously, in school, I would have to look at the practical side and how will we build those reading skills or whatever is needed. But bottom line is, we build people up. We meet them where they're at, show them that they have something worthwhile, and take it from there. Um, just recently, I was thinking about talking with a friend and thinking about what an extraordinary teacher of teachers Sid is. And there's certain things about teaching that I would say, teachers say, oh, this is a really great quality for a teacher to have. So I was reflecting on that. And first of all, he had such a great body of knowledge and was so passionate about sharing it. So that for him to share so freely with anyone and everyone about the power of thought, I mean, that's the most important thing I've ever learned in my life. So that is just awesome that he would do that, and he would just give us his best. He did not judge us. He didn't judge, oh, you might be able to pick this up, or I don't think you're ready. He just gave his best, as teachers do. He was so dedicated, and a little bit mysterious. I mean, obviously we lived in the same community and we would have some fun times together, but he helped so many people. It was just the most mysterious man in that way. An example of that is back in the early 90s, I was doing some workshops for teachers, and with a co-host from Florida. And we had just given the group this lovely discussion topic, something to do with the three principles. So they were kind of having group discussions. And Sid appeared at the hotel. I'm like, I don't know how he found out where we were or when the break was or whatever, but he appeared at the hotel, and the hotel was gorgeous in Vancouver, and it had this amazing courtyard. And so he kind of motions to the other host and I, come on, let's have it. He says, let them talk amongst each other. It's good for them. And he was all dressed up in a beautiful suit and everything, and talked to us in the courtyard and just encouraged us. And, I can't recall the details of it, but just that magical kind of dedication and just showing up where you least expected him. I was really touched by that, as was the co-host. We were really moved by that. Also, another quality of a teacher that I think is super important, it's a great way to learn if somebody is lighthearted with you, and kind of you can learn as you're kind of laughing at the same time. And Sid was amazing at that. And he would always make, I felt anyway, this was my learning, that he wouldn't let me take myself too seriously. If there was even a hint of taking credit for anything, he'd kind of jolly you out of it, because once the ego starts taking credit, it can be downhill. But also, I just loved how Sid would really see someone. He would really see you and really see your potential and be very encouraging and supportive. And I find that for me as a teacher, when I really see a student for who they are, what that does for someone, just to even have a few moments of, I'm okay. My defenses can actually relax. My intellect can go to sleep for a split second. I'm okay. And the power of what that does for someone that who's in a position of someone you trust, to see you as whole and as a beautiful human being is so powerful. It really wipes out the issues of the past. In fact, when I first experienced this, I was kind of dumbfounded. I saw it again and again. As children connect with their own wisdom or common sense, peace of mind, whatever you want to call it, they actually literally changed their past story. It's so powerful, because all of a sudden everything's the same. Obviously, you can't go back to the past, but all of a sudden they're looking back to what happened and seeing the good times rather than just all the negativity. And isn't that wonderful that you can kind of heal your past and see yourself as whole and healthy human being? So that seeing someone as beautiful. And I'm a grandma now, and I know that seeing the grandchildren, no expectations, no nothing, but just seeing them for the precious human being they are, how powerful that is. And the parents declare how powerful that is. And it helps them on their journey as they grow, because there's a lot that you could technically be insecure about, but if somebody really trusts you and loves you and sees how precious you are, it really helps you on your journey. So another thing about why I think Sid is a great teacher, I was reflecting on, look at all his students and the body of work that's been created. I probably, don't even have know all of it. Who does? But just when you look at all these amazing people and what they've done in their own fields and the variety of things they've created to be in service to humanity, it's like, wow. I think, he really, he shared his most precious knowledge with us. He didn't ever hold back. He showed us to look within, that we were our own best teacher. And then I think the third thing that I would like to say about that is that he really emphasized there's no end to this learning journey. So yeah, Sid as a mentor, there's lots of personal anecdotes and things that I'm really cherish. But as far as a career and being a teacher and an educator, what he taught us about really seeing past any challenges and behavior to really draw out the health and well-being of a child has been incredibly powerful these last 40 years of teaching. I'm retired now from working full-time, but there was no instance where these principles failed. They always, always, always work. And so that's so powerful and interesting. And it really feeds the educator. I mean, there's so many nice teachers in the world who really have heart in the right place and really want to help. And with this 3 principles, with an understanding, we never really understand, it's a mystery, but with a glimmer of it, we can really help people on that, change that trajectory to be on a path for success. So I guess that's what I have to say about about Sid as mentor and me as teacher.
If anyone has any questions or comments, you can unmute yourself, or if you raise your hand, I'll unmute you.
Thanks, Christa. I'm just really struck by the gift of giving children with labels and diagnoses the gift of sharing of knowing their innate health. Like, there's so much focused on their labels, and oh my gosh, it just kind of exploded in my awareness, the gift of that. I mean, the gift for all, right?
Yes.
But for everyone to know they're okay, but
yes,
I don't know. I really heard it deeply about children with labels and all children and all what teenager thinks they're okay or has the experience of being okay. So thank you for your sharing your experience and
pleasure. Yeah, it's something about if we can help those who are suffering. Like like I was saying, there's apparently never enough time. Teachers are so busy, but my way of working in special ed was it's it's um, it's very easy to see the hot spots. No trouble there. And to go with a little bit of understanding, to go to the hot spot. And what I mean by that is someone is wreaking havoc with the culture. They're struggling so much, it's having a very negative effect. To go to those hot spots, to help one child, and to be able, with a little bit of understanding, you're actually able to help. You're actually able to get them on their feet, rather than having to go back and back and back and back to keep fixing the same thing. It's so powerful to see kids, move on their journey, and then of course it affects the whole culture. But I agree with you. If we can help those who are really struggling, it's very touching, very, very much so. Thank you.
And Tom, I just unmuted you.
Thank you. Hi, Christa.
Hi, Tom.
Oh my God, that was what you just talked about was so beautiful, the way you talked about understanding. It just really, I feel like I learned as much in the past couple of minutes than I have in the past year. And maybe that's just because that I've heard that term love and understanding and maybe hadn't paid as much attention to it, but you really, really brought it to life. And, something that I've noticed just recently, I ride the bus a lot, and every so often people will come on and, maybe someone's seems a little irritated, or they're yelling or something like that, and I actually have been noticing, like, I've been less like myself reactionary or irritated, and just kind of like what you were saying, just seeing people as innocent.
Yeah.
How that affects my mood, even though I'm not directly interacting with this person. Yeah. And I wonder if maybe you talked about your relations with the children, but do you find yourself like more, like, just as you go about your life, even like say in a grocery store where you're just walking around, are you seeing people? Do you find that, is that alive for you, seeing people with understanding all the time? Whether you have any responsibility toward them.
When I notice,
Yeah.
I'd say yes when I notice. I'm sure a lot of things I don't notice. Maybe I don't notice if someone's agitated, but if I notice, then I'm so into seeing people in this way. It's like riding a bike. It's very natural. I know some years ago, lots of years ago now, but I was co-teaching. We had a little curriculum in the early 90s based on the 3 principles. And the co-teacher was telling the kids how anger is fear. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting. And to see that people, I've cleared a room. I've cleared a classroom because someone was becoming violent. I've intervened in a fight more than I should have. And but to understand that this anger is based on fear, it really brings out the compassion in me. So I'm not afraid of someone's anger. I see it as that person is struggling with whatever the issue is. The groceries are packed wrong, or the service isn't good enough, or whatever. You didn't put the mayonnaise on the side, or whatever it is. And you just have it just doesn't affect me as much maybe as if I didn't know this. But yeah, it's pretty incredible to start to see. And teaching is a fabulous ground for life, I think. You go in, you want to do your best, and you just you're being paid well, you've got this career, so it makes sense to always do your best as far as seeing someone. And I think it kind of spills over in your personal life, that you start to have a little empathy for the clerk who's a little run down and, you know, it's a busy holiday season or whatever, or the tourist who's totally confused and making a mess of things, you know, entangling the traffic, whatever. So I think it does make life a little easier. Absolutely. And then you never know, you know, if I say whatever I say, you never really know. In working with kids, you never really know what it is that touches them. Kids would come to me and say, "You said this to me." I'm like, "Oh, cool." You know, you never know what exactly is going to have the impact and when. So thank you.
Well, thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you, Bonnie.
Anyone else have a question or comment? Jean?
So Christa,
Hey, Jean.
so if it's all right, I'd invite you to share about your My Guide Inside curriculum, and maybe if you're aware of people who are using that at different levels. I share that with my students in my school counseling classes, and so I think they will, at least one I know is going to be using it at her alternative school this coming year.
Fabulous. When I retired from my full-time job with the school district, I kind of poked around on the internet and came across, I'd met Kathy Marshall Emerson. She's the director of National Resilience Resource Center. I'd met her in the early 90s. We were at some Three Principles events together, and of course gravitated to each other, being we were interested in education. But I saw that she had a call for curriculum on her website, and I had co-written Self-Esteem is for Everyone in the early 90s. The main author was Jeffrey Tim out of Florida. And then for my master's degree, I did another curriculum. I called it Leadership and Learning. And so when I saw this call for curriculum, I thought, I'd like to do that. And so embarked on this journey of Jane Tucker and I wrote the intermediate learner book. And then Kathy Marshall Emerson co-authored the other 6 books with me. Now, what we've done is I've gone to the societal goals where I live, which are, you know, the education goals these days are really quite global. It is a global community. So looking to what is it the society is looking for, and how can we be in service with this 3 principles understanding to serve kids K to 12. So we've created primary, intermediate, and secondary levels. And the format is the same. It's a little bit like a textbook. So the first chapter is kind of an introduction, and then we have 6 stories. The next 6 chapters are a story each, teaching stories. And then the last chapter is kind of a summing it all up. But what we're finding is, like I did some pilots here in Canada on the West Coast, and there were some other pilots done in the US, and the kids are coming up with the same reflections. There's, you know, just giving someone, whether they're 7, 8, or 17, that clue, as it was for me, so profound, of thought has something to do with it. And then the second piece is that you have wisdom and beauty inside. Those 2 things are incredible. So we're finding that the comments doesn't really matter geographically where these kids are. They're finding the same basic truths that are helping them carry on with their siblings, with friends. You know, with the little people, it's like, do I have friends on the playground? Is my family okay? And can I read and write and do the math that's necessary? So for the kids to kind of become at peace and their insecurities turn into security, it's life-changing. And again, I'd like to say that the culture of a classroom is so tight that one child who struggles gains some peace, it ripples out in a very, very wonderful way. The other thing, Jean, is that we're finding is it does, like for me, I'm known about thought creating reality for 44 years. It does not wear off. That's, I think, what is blowing teachers away is, and the teenagers. I've been in touch with the teenagers like a year later, and they're still like, that's the most valuable thing I learned. And to be able to show others that actually you can look all over the world, but actually the answers you're looking for are inside of you, and they're helping their peers. So right now I'm starting to offer professional development in service on the curriculum. And teachers are so ready, like I was saying earlier, so kind and heart in the right place to help. We don't just look at academics, we look at the whole person. And they're so ready to help, and to have a couple of tools to offer young people that really works, doesn't wear off, doesn't cost anything. It's not a gimmick. It's not a technique. It's not anything. It's really powerful. And I'd like to just end that little bit by saying we've been blown away with the little people. You know, you kind of wonder. I had a one called Inner Resource Guide with young people, but this time in particular, I was blown away by how close to being a little person is. You wonder, will they kind of, because it's kind of, you know, it's not tangible, and they're so able to pick up on this being part, being kind, being friendly, being at peace, being secure. They totally, totally get that. Isn't that amazing? So if you have little people cluing in at such a young age, how that's going to help them their whole life long. So yeah, we're thrilled with the curriculum, and teachers are very well trained. If you have a little bit of in-service on what does this mean for me as a person, this understanding, you're off to the races, and you can teach that with huge success. The curriculum, it's all there with activities and discussion prompts and so on.
Awesome. Thank you. You give me hope.
Good. Sid used to say that, Jean. He'd say that to me often. He's, you know, we all know he had a Scottish brogue, and he would talk about school teachers and school children, but he would often say, bring hope to the school children. So good.
Ellen?
Yeah, I have another question. So Jean, thank you so much for bringing that up, because it was on my radar before, but it slipped off. So so Christa, is my guide inside a book, a workbook, or a book for teachers to use with students, or for students that do students get their hands on it?
Yeah, so we have a learner book for each level, and it's paperback, quite colorful, and it has, I worked, you know, I've done so much in my career, but part of my career was with alt ed and with self-directed learners. So I've written it in a way that a student could do it on their own, but it's also designed for in class. Then there's a separate title that's the teacher's manual. In that manual are the lesson plans, and I've very carefully laid out the learning objectives and the intended outcomes. So I was helping a primary teacher last spring on reporting on the work of the children using my guidance side. And it was so simple to just kind of, there's your menu, and this child learned this and this and this, and there's your report card comment. So again, the time thing for teachers, I made it as efficient as I could for the lesson plans. And then the bookending on the lesson plans, there's the philosophy and the rationale and the tying into government mandates and so on. So
yeah, so I'm sorry, I didn't really ask the question that I wanted to ask. So I'm not a teacher. I'm not in the. Thank you, but I have a current client who's in high school, and her mother sent her to me because I'm a 3 principles practitioner, and her mother has been learning it. I was just thinking, maybe rather than just us talking and maybe getting, like, would it be appropriate for me to get the workbook for her?
Yeah.
And like do it with her in person?
Yeah. And it's wonderful. Online, there's resources that I've put together, especially at the secondary level. There's every chapter has little video clips, little 5-minute ones.
Oh, nice.
Just to, enliven it. There's art activities, but as a counselor, absolutely read a story together, something to focus on.
Yeah. Other than how much she doesn't like life.
Right. And through these stories, obviously, are very specific, and they're teaching stories. In the secondary book, every single story is true. So I've taken these stories that of kids who've grown and changed.
They want true stories.
Yes, and Jane Tucker added one as well. And then you start to see the logic. Through the stories, you see the logic. And then what I found time and again is that eventually the penny drops. And you start to see it for yourself. And it's pretty darn exhilarating. It's just a couple of little things to teach, really. And then it's just kind of the exploring and the discussing, and to be empowered with that little bit of knowledge. And you're going to love, because they're just kind of shaping their philosophy. It's not like us, where somebody's trying to break in and do something new. They're free flow. That's the human development stage. They're just ready to take things in that will benefit them. So yeah, absolutely. And we made it very reasonable. There's no training or anything, and they're just very reasonable. You can buy one copy, and then
I'll be doing that right now.
and
so much.
Good. And then use the online resources. I think you'll really enjoy it.
Thank you. I think.
Thank you.
I'll message you when we're through the book, and I'm sure that's going to just be I'm so excited. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah, absolutely good use for it.
Anyone else have any questions or comments for Christa? Christa, is there anything you'd like to say to wrap up?
It started with a feeling back in 1975. That's what captured me, is the deep feeling that comes with knowing about the power of thought. And not all, obviously Sid has passed on, and we don't have the benefit of his personal self, but I'd like to say that feeling that is the teacher is so alive on the video lectures and the audio recordings. And I think they're just, and the teenagers love that. You only need a little bit here and there of Sid's powerful voice and truth and beautiful face with the feeling just flowing out. That I think we're really, really fortunate that Sid loved tech, and that he, as a great teacher would, created all these resources for us for our lifelong journey. So I'd just like to say, aren't we lucky? and thanks everyone. It's just been wonderful to chat.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christa. There are so many little things that you said that are so simple and that I've heard a million times, but that really struck me. Just with, when you were talking about how Sid would say the same thing to the teacher as he would to the student, and your point about seeing dignity in everyone. It's nothing new, and yet, and then there's something new. So I really appreciate it. This was such a lovely talk. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone who attended live, and I hope everyone who is listening to the recording enjoys it also. I'm going to put Christa's information underneath the recording on YouTube, so you'll have her website and you can get in touch with her through there. And just want to let everyone know the next webinar is with Jack Pransky, and that is on November 13th, Wednesday, November 13th. So hopefully we'll see you then. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.